All right, fact check this podcast. And for anybody who's watching the live shows, it's been a busy day. But for those who are just catching the recordings later on, this is coming out a week from now. Tonight, I am rejoined by Tommy Salmons. Tommy is one of my favorite people to talk to because we always end up talking about good stuff that we don't necessarily intend to at the start. But tonight, we are actually going to probably talk about most of the things that we intend to. We're going to talk about our evolving worldviews, which has kind of been a theme of previous conversations we've had to some extent. And we're going to continue that because Tommy's had some ideas that have been flowing through his head, and I'm going to try to see if I can draw some of those out and expand on them a bit. Tommy, how you been doing, man?
I've been good, man. I've been doing really well. Had a really great weekend last weekend. Went up to Houston, hung out with the parents, saw my kids, got to hang out with my granddaughter. So yeah, I'm doing well.
Excellent. I have a brand new granddaughter, as a matter of fact. So
I know you do.
that's
She's beautiful, man.
exciting times. It I guess it hasn't hit me quite as hard yet because it's my stepson, so it's still a little bit of a level of disconnect, I guess. But I get to go actually meet her in person tomorrow, so uh, that'll probably change things a bit, getting to actually hold the granddaughter for the first time and actually see her, not just see pictures of her.
Well, it's funny. My granddaughter's she's 3 years old, and this wasn't my first time meeting her, obviously, but this was the first time she interacted with me because she was always scared of my beard. So yeah. So it's my daughter from my first marriage had a baby 3 years ago, and this little Callie is her name. She just clung to Beatrix. She would not come anywhere near me because of the beard. And it was funny. My oldest son was like that. We would go over to a friend of mine's house whenever I was in my 20s, late teens, early 20s, play music. And his her dad was in a band, and it was a pretty popular band around Houston, and he had a big long black beard, and my son would stare at him and scream just like, oh my god, and just terrified of the beard. So it wasn't offensive to me. I actually found it kind of funny.
When Sean was little bitty, I guess he was like right at a year old. So he was born. So he was a year and a half. I was interviewing for a pretty good promotion at the job that I had, and my boss at the time, he was like, before you go interview for this, because I always had a goatee, and he was like, before you interview for this job, you should really shave. He was like, they'll take you more seriously if you're clean shaven going in for this interview.
Mm.
Say, okay, I can do that. So I went home the day before the interview and like shaved up and got all prettied up looking, and I went to pick Sean up out of his crib, and his eyes got that big, and like he did not want anything to do with me. Like
Yeah.
I had a clean face for the first time in his life, and he did not want anything to
He's
do with
like,
it.
I don't know who this is.
And
Get
I
your
was like, "That's
hands
it.
off of me." Yeah.
I will never do it again." No, I did it once. It didn't go so well. I'll never do it again. Which when he was a baby, I'd hold him, and he would lay on my chest, and he'd just put his hand up, and he'd just rub. He
Yeah.
would rub my goatee and go to sleep on my chest. So now he's 6'2" and weighs about 240 pounds. And if he tried
And
to
he
lay on my
still rubs
chest
your
now,
goatee.
he would smother me. But uh, good old
Yeah.
days.
I remember it's like I think I was like 16 the first time I saw my dad shave clean. And he was he was jacking with my mom. He started a job with a company that required that he was clean shaven. He always had a beard when I was growing up. And not a long beard, but just a nice crop beard. And he I guess it was I was about 15 or 16 years old, and he got this job with a lumber company where um, he had to shave. They didn't want any facial hair whatsoever. So he thought it would be funny if he shaved his head too. So when my mom got home, he had shaved his head and his beard. He looked nothing like my dad. I was like, I don't even know this guy.
It's funny how appearances are really kind of ingrained with people when we go changing them. It's kind of it really messes with stuff.
Yeah.
I had long hair for the longest time. I let my hair grow out for better part of 3 years, and at the time when I cut it, it was down past my shoulders. It was about to right there, and when I cut it, like now when I look back at pictures of that, I can't believe that I ever had my hair that long, because until that point I'd always kept my hair about like this, and ever since then I've kept my hair about like this. But for that 3 year period where I grew it out, it just looks so different. But there were also people that worked with me at that time that they didn't know me any other way except that for having long hair. So when I cut it, it was like a complete shell shock to a bunch of the people that I worked with. So it's funny how how our appearances kind of influence the way people look at us and think about us, and just generally speaking, interact with us.
Yeah, we always joke when Beatrix like goes somewhere without glasses on, or meets or like interacts with somebody and she doesn't have her glasses on. It's the first time she's ever interacted with them without her glasses. We call it her Clark Kent disguise, because she looks completely like a completely different person.
That is really funny, because it's always the joke of, how could Clark Kent just take glasses off and become Superman and nobody knows who he is? And then if you know somebody that wears glasses all the time and then you see them without their glasses, they are almost unrecognizable. It's not that far-fetched when you do really know somebody who just wears glasses all the time and you see them without.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. I'll send you some pictures later.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Let's kind of dive into our evolving worldviews. And I think the more interesting part of this conversation, because I'm sure we could spend most of the night talking about our evolving political views on stuff, but I think that's actually the less interesting thing, because we've gone down similar roads that a lot of others have gone down, and it's been talked about on podcast after podcast after podcast over the last year of the way COVID has kind of changed the way people think about things and look at things, especially on the political spectrum. But I think you are experiencing some interesting growth and changes in like your personal and spiritual life as well. And I think those are more interesting, especially in light of like some of my Substack writing, or all of my Substack writing for the last 3 or 4 months, has been based on the current state of modern Christianity, especially Western Christianity, and the departure from true biblical orthodox type of values that the Christian church had always held, and kind of the cuckolding of Christianity by progressivism really is, I think, the best way to describe it. So that's been something that's really been weighing on me a lot, and I know you've been taking a spiritual journey over the last several months and even year. So let's kind of get into that. How has some of that been evolving and changing for you? Not just over the last year and a half, but like over the course of your life a bit.
Okay, so I think in order to touch on the subject, we have to unfortunately get into the political a little bit. I think that's a necessary angle we have to get into. For most of my life, I wasn't political. Like, I was pretty apolitical. I didn't really care about politics. I never paid attention to them. And that really went, as I became more interested in politics, that view of politics really shaped the way that I interacted with politics. Right. So it was really the reason why I was drawn to libertarianism, because, I always had kind of a screw the government kind of mentality. So therefore the libertarian angle was just amplifying screw the government. All right. So, but whenever I got involved in politics, it wasn't for the sake of politics. It was because I was trying to figure out how the world operated. I wanted a blueprint that I could lay out and say, okay, this is how the world operates. How am I supposed to engage in it? And I got caught up in libertarianism, and I don't regret it. I actually still adhere to a lot of the political philosophy of libertarianism. Problem is, Marx won that battle to where if you listen to a Marxist talk and you start talking to a Marxist, what they do is everything's politics, right? And for me, my entire life, nothing was politics. It was all like, yeah, whatever. I don't care about all that stuff, you know? Um, but then you slowly started seeing in the society, everything became political, everything. So you had to take a side. You had to choose one side or the other. You had to figure out, you had to draw that red line in the sand and pick a side. And I've come to the understanding, um, which I had this conversation with LB Mooney's the other day in kind of short form fashion. I've come to the understanding that a political philosophy like libertarianism is a solid political philosophy for the lane of politics, but it is not a worldview, and it is not a worldview that you can build your set of ideals and your life structure upon. And what has happened, because Marx won the argument and made everything political, a lot of libertarians utilize libertarian political philosophy as a worldview when it's not meant to be that. It is literally meant to be a political philosophy that you engage politics with. So I had fallen into that trap to where I had structured my entire chain of thought, my entire life around the political philosophy and tried to manipulate that into becoming a worldview. And whenever you do that, you're building your house on sand. I thought that was a good start.
Yeah, that was a really good start. And that is because I have, I don't know, we talked about it a little bit on my show Friday night. Like, I started out very like BoomerCon, for lack of a better way of putting it. Like, I was a George W. Bush Republican in the early 2000s. I went traveling to campaign for W in 04. Like, I was gung ho, and it was because I was young and dumb and I didn't have an actual worldview. I saw what happened on 9/11, and I thought that, all the stories that I heard about that were, I didn't hear any stories about that. I knew that the terrorists attacked us and they were the bad guys, so we needed to fight them on every front, and I needed to be for the strong Republican who was going to do that, not for some squishy Democrat that was going to sell us out to the highest bidder overseas, whoever that happened to be. And then as the war drug on and never seemed to end, and I started to grow up a little bit and figure out what was actually going on in the world, I kind of became apolitical, for lack of a better way of defining it. Like, I realized that the system was rigged when they nominated McCain in 08, and then they turn around and nominate Romney in 12. It's like they're not serious about winning. They don't actually, like, the game is rigged. They don't actually care.
Yeah.
Like the too big to fail bailouts in 08, with the crash and the recession and everything. Like, it's like this is not what Republicans are supposed to be about. And that kind of disenfranchised me to the whole thing for a while. And I started seeing libertarian ideas and libertarian principles, and I was like, those are things that I could actually get behind. And so I started paying a little more attention to politics, just from a sense of, I can use this libertarian stuff to say that both sides are equally worthless. And that was kind of it. That was my political philosophy for a while, was just both sides are dumb. Everything is rigged. at least these guys are saying, hey, or at least these guys who call themselves libertarians are saying the right things. Even if and I always kind of felt like that as a political party, it was kind of useless, but they said the right things. And that was good enough for me because I was mostly apathetic to it anyway. And then, and then you get 2020 and all of that. But as we're leading up to that, I also, like we had talked about on your show about a year ago, I had my divorce and everything that came with that, and a lot of personal and spiritual growth that came through that. So as I'm kind of developing more of my libertarian-esque philosophical and religious worldviews, because that was around the time when I started spending a lot of time reading the Quran, reading the Dhammapada, studying different religions and stuff like that. And none of it ever caused me to sway in my Christian beliefs. It actually kind of helped round me out and give me a better understanding of my own beliefs, and kind of built my own faith even stronger through understanding all of that other stuff and learning those other faiths and religions and what they were all about. So it was kind of moving me in that direction politically, where I was learning about a lot of other stuff, which opened me up to wanting to learn about a lot of other stuff. So that when I did start to become more political, instead of being like just boomer con, everything is right wing, now I'm open to looking at what's the Green Party saying? What are the Libertarians saying? What is communism actually about? Like, I read the Communist Manifesto a couple times. I still need to get a copy of Mao's Little Red Book, but I've read it, but I don't have one. I've been told I need one, and which I do. I need to add that to my collection of things that I have, because they're all things that are important to figuring out your worldview, and then expanding on it and finding out what are other worldviews, and how do these all mesh together to make everything that we've got going on. So the libertarianism was a fun little romp for a couple of years of expanding the way that I was thinking about everything. And like you said, like I don't regret that at all. I do look back at some of the things that I said a couple of years ago, and I'm like, ooh, I was kind of one of those cringy libertarians. Like I was definitely hitting the neither right nor left pipe pretty hard there for a while. And in hindsight, you have to have a strong friend enemy distinction, which Pete talks about, and that's getting harder to stay open to the neither right nor left thing, because you almost have to differentiate the two when making that distinction. It's getting tough not to, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on over the last several years in the old noggin, and I think the political side of it is a good jumping off point, because a lot of times we do, like I said, like my boomer con, late teens, early 20s phase, like I didn't have a worldview. I had a political philosophy that was not very well developed, and now I'm starting to develop it even. Now that it has started to develop, I find myself wanting to develop it more.
Well, I think it was in like 2000. I started my podcast in 2018, and it wasn't long, probably March, April 2019. I was already tired of talking about politics, and that wasn't even like the entire subject matter of what I had talked about in 2018. Like I started in September. I think my first podcast was with, it was Michael. Oh man, I'm forgetting his last name right now. And then I had Scott Horton and Pete Quinones, but then I knew all these entrepreneurs that I was also interviewing, and I was chatting with. And in 2019, maybe mid 2019, I started talking more about homesteading and raising chickens and stuff like that a little bit more. You know, and I would talk to libertarians that had sway in the libertarian movement about their projects, what they were doing. Because I thought one of the big things that was missing from the libertarian conversation was the fact that you're building that side project and you're doing something for yourself on the side and creating this like kind of insurance policy for yourself. And I guess I started seeing that what the libertarian podcasts were aimed in this particular direction. And my entire vision was that in order to experience the libertarian ends, you would have to have a complete worldview. And so I started questioning, well, if I'm not able to solve this problem through this philosophy, then I need to begin moving in other directions. So as I began to look around and read, and I stopped reading libertarian books, I started reading a lot of books from globalists of the past, and really got into reading like Brzezinski and I'm reading Malthus right now. Klaus Schwab popped up on my radar. I started reading his stuff. So I really started paying attention to more of the quote unquote conspiracy angle, because I realized that what libertarians weren't taking into effect, they weren't taking it into context with the entire globe. They were focused mainly on the United States. And they weren't talking about how you were living your daily life and how you were going through your day-to-day process. And I was talking about being a blue collar guy. I was talking about, raising chickens, being over the road, constantly, supply chains breaking down, like not even saying like, this is how we're going to fix it. It's just like, these things are coming down the pike, and it's like one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. And then you kind of had like the post-libertarian movement happening over off to the side with Pete and Matt Erickson and all these guys. And you had the hardcore like libertarian podcasters like Scott, Dave Smith. And I found myself like dead center. I was like right in the middle of it, all of it. And I kind of still am. I'm friends with all these guys, and like, I don't have any bad thing to say about what Scott does or what Pete does or what Dave does, or I just don't find myself in a position to where it matters. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out what it is people are forgetting to talk about that happens in between these two moments. Right. And what I realized,
because on the one side, you've got the identification of the problem, and on the other side, you've got the identification of the solution. But we have to get from identifying the problem to actually creating the solution. And there's steps that are have to happen in between. And
well, in what it is it, at least in my, like, from my perspective, what I'm watching happen, what I'm watching take place is all these guys are still looking for a political philosophy to become the worldview, to encompass the entirety of reality around them. And I don't say that to like short any of these guys or like insult any of them, because I'm great friends with all of them. It's just the fact that you're missing a piece. And what you're missing is you're missing that foundation to build that political philosophy on. You need an entire worldview in order for that political philosophy to fit inside. That it can't be your entire the way that you view everything. You can't view the way you interact with your neighbor as a political philosophy. That just doesn't work. That's not how people interact. And so it's been kind of a journey on my part trying to figure out, like, what is it that I'm seeing around me? Number one, why is the world seemingly falling apart in the way that it is? Where does the political philosophy of libertarianism fit into the spectrum of why it's falling apart the way it is? And then what are the gaps that libertarianism doesn't cover? And then whenever I start identifying that, I started realizing that's when I really began to realize, like, oh, viewing the world through a political philosophy is not going to create sanity on my part. What it might do, it might get me a lot of subscribers because I'm hitting all the virtue signal talking points. But what I'm not doing is actually addressing the problems that are right in front of me. Well, I'm a man, I'm married, I have a lot bigger issues than gaining an audience. Like, you know, so I'm not trying to solve this problem for you. I'm trying to solve this problem for myself and my children. I've always said I started my podcast for my kids to see kind of the evolution of my thought and the things that I go through when working through these problems. So I want to give the most honest, truthful breakdown of everything around me that I see and how it can be addressed. And what I realized is that this narrow political philosophy was a piece of the way I see the world, and it was a piece of the way I interact with the world, but it could not be the totality of how I went through my daily life.
Yes. And it can speak to some of the things that you're using to figure out how you're going through your daily life, but it's not the end all solution to the questions that you have in your mind. Like a political philosophy is never going to answer all of the questions that you have for life. Like it's just not they're not built on that type of a thing. Right. And the ones that are built on that type of a thing are, I would argue, aren't actually political philosophies. They are a spiritual philosophy, like
Kama Sutra.
Yeah, or like the politics of Islam are the faith of Islam. It's not a political philosophy. It is a religious ideal, and it's an actual worldview, and it's an actual lifestyle. It's not like the only time that politics is going to influence every aspect of your life is if every aspect of your life, including politics, is built into your worldview and your and the thing that
you have to make the politics the religion. That's the problem. And I was never willing to do that. I was always like, yeah, it's like, screw those guys. I don't care. I don't like all that shit. So,
and these days, the ones that you see who have made politics their religion are the ones who have no other religion than like the ones on the left specifically. Like that is their religion. Their religion is progressivism.
Right. Well, and even some libertarians. Right. So there's a serious issue that we have when we're utilizing the term libertarian, because of there are different types of people that use that term in different ways. Now, I quote unquote officially abandoned the term libertarian in 2019 when I heard Tucker Carlson say that Hillary Clinton was promoting libertarian foreign policy, right? Through all these engagements overseas. And I'm like, this guy had, like, if that's what normies think libertarian is, I want nothing to do with it. But I still operate and I conduct my business and my podcast through the Libertarian Institute. I mean, that's where I operate at. So I have a lot in common with like the Patrick McFarlane, Keith Knight, Scott Horton libertarians. right? It's the Cato reason hedonist libertarians that I have a serious issue with, because that is not the same strain of libertarianism that I imagine it to be. I imagine a political philosophy that you are utilizing to engage with politics from this line of thought, and that you're doing everything within your power to get, to vote or act in the political manner in a way that moves the politics to kind of what your worldview would be, or what your framing would be of where politics should be. The reason Cato hedonistic libertarianism has created libertarianism as a kind of soft religion, to where everything in your world, everything in your life has to be viewed through the lens of libertarianism, right? What I've discovered is this is a result of the atheistic mindset invading society, right? So, I mean, just to be honest, my wife's an atheist. I have no issues with individual atheism. Like, that doesn't bother me. It's societal atheism that's the issue, right? As the society has moved into a more atheistic position, it has grown more and more unstable. Now, I don't view this as just coincidence. When you look at the Soviet Union, what atheism led to in the Soviet Union, Solzhenitsyn writes that he had to get locked up in the gulag in order to go through that struggle and find faith. And what I'm witnessing right now in our world around us is a situation into which the gulag is a panopticon. It's a technology gulag, right? I've heard people call it a techno ghetto, or a technological ghetto, right? But really, it's a type of gulag that you're locked into, and by being locked into it, you're able to function within society. If you end up on the outskirts of it, if you get thrown out, you get ostracized, then you can't bank. You have trouble finding jobs, or making money, or buying stocks, or engaging in any kind of future endeavors, or communicating with people, because everything's run through technology now. Now they've figured out a way to lock everybody into these gulags, make people want to stay within the gulag, because outside the gulag, it's the wilderness and it's chaos out there, right? And so that's what I'm seeing, and I'm tying this directly to an atheistic worldview. Whereas if you look at like the rise of democracy, I've said this several times. Democracy, yes, it's two wolves and a sheep voting for what's for dinner. Worse than that, it is morality by popular opinion. Popular demand determines what your morality is. Your morality no longer comes from a higher power. The group think is the higher power. The hive mind determines. If 51% determine that this is morality, that we should be cutting the genitals off of children, the 49% need to shut up. Well, that's not morality, right? That's a mob. That's a cult.
Well,
and I don't want to be part of a cult. Yeah.
When it expands on the idea of atheism becoming a more prevalent thing. When like your wife is awesome. I know plenty of individual atheists who are just not, they don't believe anything. And that's cool. Like, generally speaking, an individual can have that. But when you start to see the atheist collectivism that has been really taking hold of a lot of the modern West, what it becomes is they create their own religion out of something. It's like there is a power vacuum within society to have something as that symbol, that religious thing. And if it's not Christ, if it's not the church, they make something else to be that thing. So like collective atheism is a religion in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, look at the
and that
George Floyd memorials.
Right. Like you've got the LGBTQ stuff, you've got the George Floyd stuff. There's just there is almost a religion of anti-religious people. Like it is almost dogmatic the way
Sam Harris is beyond dogmatic.
Right. It is. Yeah, it's crazy. But it is a religion unto itself to be anti-religious for some of these. And it's always like a groupthink thing. It's people crave connection. And if you're not getting it from something that's faith-based, then you create it based on a faith in something that you find. Like it's religion is paramount to the human condition, whether you believe in a higher power or you believe in something else. You're going to find your religion somehow, and our modern society is finding it in the worst possible ways.
Well,
unfortunately.
And here's a big issue that I had. I was talking to my mom about this the other day. It was the contradiction within my head that I was dealing with. And this is what moved me to the Orthodox faith, was reading Orthodox books, finding out that these contradictions could be overcome, and that there was a direction in which I could move to overcome these contradictions. Right. And so I was dealing with this idea that, okay, I find the sexualizing of children to be completely disturbing and immoral. But I had no moral framework in order to tie that to, so then it was just a subjective opinion. And until I tied myself to a moral framework and accepted that moral framework, it was only subjective. It could no longer be determined as an objective moral ideal in my head. So there was this contradiction that I'm telling you, sexualizing children is wrong. Now prove it to me objectively. Well, I think I lost the argument right there. You see what I'm saying? And so not having that framework, that objective framework that I could tie my morality to by depending on my own individual autonomy as a moral compass. Well, if I can do that, so could everybody else. Right? And so you could have your own moral framework and your neighbor could have their own moral framework. And if they butt heads, then it's just a matter of who wins, who kills who first. You're right. Like that's who wins. And so I found that to find an objective moral framework, I had to tie all my philosophies in life to a bigger worldview that I could use as a foundation of rock instead of dealing with the foundation of sand.
Okay, so how does that bring you into the steps you've taken with orthodoxy, and how has that kind of rounded out your worldview on a lot of this stuff?
I had a bad experiences with people in the field of religion as I was growing up. There were incidents and that where it embittered me, and eventually it ran me away from any sort of religiosity. I began to call myself agnostic, and I stayed in that arena for 11 years. And it was how I moved into the realm of orthodoxy was a large struggle. I mean, you saw part of this, like you would hear me talk about it. There was a lot of struggle. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of not wanting to give up that autonomy, and I knew it was going to be a change in my lifestyle, and I didn't know if I was willing to give that up and to move in that direction. So there was a lot of my own pride and subjective reasoning fighting the objective kind of like framework that I was seeing. So what I was going through was, I see this framework, I see what's happening in front of me, and I see how it all fits together, and I see how it creates this complete worldview in which I can operate within, and everything. There are no more contradictions taking place within my mind. I can actually like work through this stuff and be pointed in an honest direction, or I can stay comfortable. And that was the fight. It was like, I'm really comfortable. Like, my life is good. I'm not, I don't have like personal problems, for the most part. Like, I mean, a lot less than most people do. There's no drama in my life. It's very laid back. I go to work, I come home, I hang out with my wife, drink a few beers, we eat, we go to bed. Like, there's not a whole lot going on there. It's pretty easy. I have a pretty easy life. I have chickens and dogs and pond, and I'm pretty good, man. Everything's fine. So it wasn't one of these situations where I was like in this like slide downhill to where I had to restructure my entire life or it's all going to fall apart on me. It wasn't that. It was all internal. It was all psychological with me. How do when I entered libertarianism, whenever I came to that libertarian philosophy, I was searching for truth. And this search for truth never stopped. And it just, as it got closer to orthodoxy, it got a lot more uncomfortable. Like, whenever I'm learning a lot of new stuff, I was like, all right, yeah, it's cool. But when learning all this new stuff put me in a position to where I'm facing religion and faith, and I'm like, that can't be the only combatant to the lies and the destruction we see around us. And so I struggled. I struggled constantly looking around, trying to figure it out. Drove me crazy. For over a year, I struggled. Even my priest, Father Michael, he even made a comment whenever I finally did commit to joining the church. He said, it took you long enough. You've been coming here almost every week for over a year, and I couldn't even get you to come to a catechumen class for 8 months.
Our first conversation was the Sunday afternoon that you had attended your first service.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. I loved it. There was no reason there was nothing but love and respect for what they were doing. It was just this internal fight, this internal thing that I'm dealing with. Like, it's like, man, do I really need to change my whole life? Do I really need to flip this upside down, and start changing habits and do this? I'm really comfortable. I'm really in a good spot. There's nothing going on. But because of the podcasting and this just constant search that I've been on for, I don't know, since 2015, I guess. Because of that journey that I've been on, that path that I've been walking, it just led me to this as the solution and to the worldview issue. And it was very uncomfortable. I didn't enjoy it at all. I still, there are moments where I'm like, oh gosh, what am I doing? Like, so, but yeah, no, but it has changed the way I view things. It's changed, not the way I view things, but it's changed it's gotten rid of the contradictions, I guess. And a lot of things are more clear now than they ever have been before.
I think that's a struggle for everybody at some point in their walk of faith, and especially with Christianity, is there is kind of a point where you have to sort of accept that it's right, and that like for me, it was really tough. I think I actually talked about it with you, a year or so ago. But like I had that moment where I thought I thought I could handle my life, like strong, independent, smart, successful. I made plenty of money. I knew what I was doing. I had a wife and kids, and I had this life shit figured out, right? So there was no reason for me to take everything to God, because I didn't need. God had bigger problems to deal with. And then when I hit the point in my life where I couldn't fix anything, and then as I couldn't fix certain things, then there were other things that just kept like snowballing on top of those things, and then I couldn't fix those things either. And then I finally like break down, and I'm like, okay, I really fucked up here, and I can't do this. Can you help me out with it? Then it all went in the opposite direction of what I wanted it to go, because I wanted it to be fixed in my way, the way I
you wanted specific ends to the problem.
Right. I knew I knew what the solution was and how to fix it. I just couldn't make that happen. So I need you to fix it for me. And then when that didn't happen, then I got mad, and it was just like, all right, well, if I can't fix it and you won't fix it, then fuck this. I'm never going to put myself in a position that I have to rely on anybody else to fix it ever again. And then I had some real like actual come to Jesus moments with grappling through that. And then I figured out like, oh man, I've really not been doing this right at any point. And this does require me to not rely on me all the time, but to actually put my faith and my life in the hands of something higher than me, and rely on that to guide my worldview and to guide the way that I craft my life from here forward. And since going through all that, I don't have trauma anymore. I don't have stress or bullshit that I deal with. It is very comfortable, but it's also comfortable in a uncomfortable sense, because I am very reliant on, like, I don't know what the plan is that God has for me, but I know that it's going to work out. And if there's a part where I feel like it's not working out, that's probably because I've switched back to me trying to fix it my way and not seeing the way that it's supposed to be. So it has taken a huge, and for somebody that's as OCD as I am, like, you can't see it from this distance, but every book on my bookshelves are arranged in a very, very specific order. And as soon as I walk into my house, like if there's anything out of order, I know it immediately. Like I instinctively can feel that something's not where it's supposed to be, and it flies all over me. Like, so to let go of the direction of my life like that, and to kind of have blind faith in what the plan is for my life is, it does take a lot of self-sacrifice, and it is an uncomfortable thing.
I'm so not OCD. My office would drive me insane, man.
Just looking at your bookshelf is the
You start twitching.
But it is an uncomfortable thing, and I think that's how you know that it's a worldview, and it's something that has value, and it's not just a philosophy that is not going to impact things one way or the other.
Well, it's like I'll bring this back to the conversation I had with my mom the other day. It's a worldview that I'm able to take the principles of, and I'm able to incorporate the patterns that I see within Christianity and lay them on top of the world and make sense of what I'm seeing in front of me. Right. And so I couldn't do that with libertarianism. I could never say the non-aggression principle fixes the reason that a 4-year-old has cancer. But by taking that Christian worldview and understanding it and laying it and patterning it on top of the world, I can then make sense of what happened, why this is occurring. Right. I can then understand, like, if I were it, okay, let's just take one of my situations in my life, for instance. Libertarianism has never given me a solution as to how to deal with my daughter, who did not want anything to do with me for years because her mother was telling her lies about me and making me sound like a horrible human being. Libertarianism doesn't give me a way to operate within that problem. So then I'm stuck frustrated because I have that. If that's my worldview and I'm painting everything in that light, well, if I just am obey the nap, then my daughter will love me again. Like, no, that's not the way this works. Right. I have to find a bigger, broader spectrum of how to view the world that is non-contradictory, which is hard. Like any kind of worldview that is non-contradictory is going to be very few and far between. And so I have to find a way to view this situation and pattern a sort of worldview on top of it in order for me to understand it. And therefore I can work through it without going insane. How do I do that? How do I encounter that? And it's not libertarianism that helps me through that. It is the fact that I am able to look at the map of the world through the Orthodox Christian lens, understand the teachings of the Christian faith, and therefore understand not only why my ex-wife did the things she did, but why my daughter believed them, and how then I should interact moving forward in order to repair that relationship, which is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is not to point the finger and cast blame, as good as that may make you feel. The ultimate goal is to repair the relationship. So the pointing the finger and casting blame, as good as it might make me feel, is an obstruction to healing that relationship. So therefore I won't do that. I would never understand that through any other worldview.
The concepts of forgiveness and reconciliation are fairly, I don't want to say unique to Christianity, because other faiths have them as part of it, but that's kind of the fundamental staple of Christianity. I mean, Jesus on the cross is all of that wrapped up into this one moment of, like, that is our forgiveness and redemption. And you can't separate that Christian faith from that in any way. There are other tenets of other religions that you can kind of build your worldview around outside of that, but that's the staple of Christianity that you can't get away from, and that's I think it's something that when people really understand that, it's why people who are either new to faith or kind of being renewed in their faith do experience such a huge change, is because if you've been a selfish person and you've been more act-centric or more be a or something like that, like when you get to the heart of forgiveness and reconciliation, really changes things. I was able to get over the bitterness of my divorce relatively quickly, because around that time I was also going through my kind of renewing of my faith and kind of figuring out where I had gone wrong in what I thought had been my faith prior to that. And so I remember one time my mom asked me, like, how are you not mad about everything? It's like, what is being mad about that accomplish me in terms of getting right with myself going forward and being right with God and being right with my kids? And like,
Yeah.
you know, you have to not necessarily forgive and forget, but forgive and reconcile and move forward, you know, take those lessons with you and have a stronger faith and a better walk because of it. And that's tough for people. That's why it is a challenge. It is a growing experience. Is you have to be willing to let go of that stuff and move forward. And that's not easy for a lot of people, especially in modern society. That like you know, we are. Somebody mentioned it earlier in the chat. Like, we are a society that's based on like justice and getting what you deserve and stuff like that. And that's not the fundamental tenets of
it's not real
Christianity.
That's not reality. That's not the way life works. Like, you can look around and like, that's just not reality. That's just not, you know, like, I mean, I'm sure you had the same saying in your house, life isn't fair, you know, like, whatever. It's not going to be fair. It doesn't matter, you know? And so you got to suck it up, buttercup. You got to move on. And how are you going to move on? Are you going to lean onto your own understanding and be bitter and angry? Like, that doesn't do anybody any good. You know, like, you're only making yourself miserable, because I guarantee you the person that you're bitter and angry at isn't thinking about you near as much as you're thinking about them.
I think that's for our modern society. I think that's really a huge lesson. And you see it play itself out on social media all the time. I still am on Twitter, and I know you are not, and I think you're enjoying your time not being on Twitter.
Yeah, I get so much more done. I'm like so much more at peace. I read instead of go on Twitter. I'm reading Seraphim Rose, and y'all are on Twitter arguing, and I'm just like, I'll get on the chat every once in a while, and somebody will post on Twitter. I'll be like, yeah, whatever. Like,
somebody had commented on some. I was in one of those Twitter spats a few weeks ago, and somebody said, "I don't know why you're so angry and bitter." I was like, literally nothing that I've said was said out of anger or bitterness. I said, I've been laughing my ass off at this entire conversation the whole time. It's like, I'm sorry that for some reason you are angry and bitter about it, and you think that I am, but I'm absolutely not. I'm having a blast with this, and it's hilarious. And y'all should really find some joy in this, and like, stop taking it all so seriously, and learn how to move on and not be like that.
Yeah, find that sense of humor and just have some fun, whatever. But no, I don't miss Twitter at all. I don't even. I'm on Facebook and Getter, and I just don't use them. I just have no. I guess I've just gotten to the point where I have no desire to utilize social media at all. It just doesn't matter to me. I mean, for all I know, they've restored my Twitter account since Elon Musk took over. I don't even check. It's like, I'm like, whatever. I don't care.
Stephen, I don't know if the goat broke in or what the sound was. I have my spear at the ready as always. So if something comes around that corner, I am prepared to attack whatever it is. But
it sounds like a dog shaking its head. But
it's just a dumbass kid.
It's just a dumbass kid.
All right, look, sorry.
Oh, that one again.
You know, me too. You know, you can't come busting in the house like that. Like, I'm always ready to attack.
Okay, leave me alone a bit.
You would think he would know better at this point, after I almost knocked him downstairs one night when he tried to jump out and scare me. My instincts are.
I was trying to be quiet. I'm sorry. All right.
My fight or flight instincts are murder, and then figure out what it was that I just hit after I'm done.
Yeah, you're a child.
He jumped out from around the corner one night trying to scare me, and I punched him straight in the chest. And then as soon as I hit him, I realized it was him, and I grabbed him before he went just tumbling head over heels down the steps. I was like, dude, you have to know better than to try to jump out at me. Like my internal trigger is just whatever it is that's coming at me, I kill it first, and then I figure out what it was after I'm done with it.
Yeah. Ask questions later. So,
all right, we got to the bottom of what was attacking me in my house. Just a dumbass kid.
Next on Ghost Stories.
So we do have I have a suspicion we've got a bobcat problem again. We had a bobcat problem when we first moved in here, and I took care of that one. But I think we've got a new one, and because our regular cats have both disappeared now, and we had when we were letting the chickens free range there for a while, one of them disappeared, and then all the other ones went back to the coop and had no interest in free ranging anymore. So
yeah, that'll do it.
You hear stuff banging around, start wondering if it's time to start shooting again.
I went. We were sitting at the kitchen table. I guess it was Christmas morning. We were sitting there, and I was watching my ducks on the pond because I can see my pond from my window, and so I'm watching the ducks, and something caught my eye, and I look up. I kind of look up off the pond and I see a big freaking coyote, and I mean this coyote is almost wolf size, like huge, and I was like, crap. I was like, so I need to watch out for this guy, and by the time I got to my room and realized what it was, got to my room, got the rifle. My wife's like, don't kill it. And I'm like, no, wait. So I get out the back door and it's gone. And this morning before I went to church, I'm sitting there and I'm having a cigarette and I'm reading. And I don't know, for some reason, something told me to like look at the pond. So I look over there, I see the ducks and they're swimming towards the house, and I'm like, I wonder what they're doing, because usually if they come towards the house, they go lengthwise across the pond, and they have a specific spot they come up on. Well, they're coming into an area they never take shore on, so I'm watching them, and I see something move across on the other side of the pond. I look up, there's a big ass German Shepherd over on the other side of the pond. I was like, what the hell? So obviously my dogs, I opened the door to run it off because I saw it had a collar on. So I'm like, I'm just going to go run it off. I'm not going to shoot somebody's dog. But so I opened the door to go out there and run it off. And my dogs go freaking crazy. They see it and they're going nuts. So luckily I had their collars on them. Their invisible fence was around their necks, so they could only go so far. But I was like, man, that dog would have been in for a rough time if these two would have gotten a hold of him. He would have been a squeaky toy real quick.
What's interesting thing about living out in the country, I guess, is the animal problems. I've told it on
better than the people problems of the city.
Very true. So I've told it on the morning show that I do. When we had our bobcat problem originally when we moved in, we would see it out here walking across the little field in the mornings, and I was sitting here one day, and the dogs were getting all worked up, and I went and looked out the back door, and sure enough, there it was prowling around the outside perimeter of the goat pen. So I keep the 22 next to the back door just for that instance. So I grabbed the 22 and shot it, and it hit the ground and rolled over and screamed, and then it took off out in the woods. So I followed the blood trail until I was sufficiently convinced that there was way too much blood on the ground for this thing to survive for very long. So I was like, okay, taken care of. Come back to the house and sent my wife a text. I said, bobcat problem has been taken care of. And she said, did you shoot a big cat? I was like, yes, I shot a bobcat. And She said, our neighbor has a lynx, like a $3,000 pet. She said, and they let that thing roam. I was like, number one, why the fuck are you letting a $3,000 pet roam loose out here where we have bobcats and stuff? And number two, I'm positive that I shot a bobcat. And I sent her a picture of a bobcat. I was like, this is what I shot. And then she sends me a picture back of a lynx. And God, it looks exactly like a fucking bobcat. I was like, well, I'm pretty sure this is what I shot anyway. But luckily, a couple days later, I saw their lynx sitting on their porch. And so I was like, so either the bobcat moved onto their porch or it was actually their lynx, and I was in good shape. I didn't shoot our neighbor's pet. But yeah, for a couple of days, I was a little bit worried. But
I think lynx are slightly smaller than bobcats.
Yeah, it wasn't the one that I shot was bigger. It had more of a bulk to it than the lynx. But yeah, it was the joys of living out in the country.
Yeah,
and having neighbors who have exotic pets for some reason, letting them wander.
Yeah, why would you let them wander? That's the question. I don't mind if you have exotic pets, but if you have a $3,000 pet, you probably want to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, keep that thing in your yard at least. Like, don't and like Sam says, I probably saved the lynx because that bobcat, our neighbor down the other way, he had a bunch of chickens at one time, and this bobcat had gotten all of his chickens. So this thing had been terrorizing the entire neighborhood for quite some time before I moved in and took care of it. I can't believe this far out in the country we don't have more neighbors who are willing to just walk out on their porch and shoot stuff. But
you need to get you a Great Pyrenees or an Anatolian Shepherd or something like that to keep with your goats and stuff to protect them.
Yeah, I need a good outside dog. We've got our two inside dogs. They're huge divas. When it snows, we put them outside, and they tiptoe through the snow just long enough to pee, and then they're like banging their head on the door. Let me back in. It's cold.
Yeah, my dogs would be worthless. They're good during the day, but at night they're nothing more than electric blankets. That's all they are. So,
well, Tommy, you got anything else on the? I feel like we covered this pretty thoroughly before.
I think
broke in and started making noise. And
no, that's fine. I think we got like in like at least scratched the surface a little bit of what I was thinking of. I mean, there's still some other things that I have on my mind, but like I said, I want to sit down and write a little bit and try to work out like I'm trying to figure out how to work it linearly, because I feel like even in this conversation, I was kind of jumping, and there are gaps that need to be filled in. And I feel like if I sit down and am able to take some time to write it out, I can actually fill those gaps in and kind of put all my thoughts together. But I appreciate this. I really do.
I appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of fun. I always enjoy our chats and conversations we have. Plug all your stuff, and we will call it a wrap.
Yeah, TommySalmons.com for my Substack. If you're a paid subscriber to my Substack or my Patreon, I have extra podcasts every week that they all get access to. Year zero at the Libertarian Institute. So that's libertarianinstitute.org/year-0/. And that's pretty much it, because I'm not on social media.
Well, thanks again, Tommy. This has been great. And for everybody watching and listening, be sure to tune in next time. Next episode will be a solo show. I'm trying to figure out what my topic is going to be. I got a handful that I've been looking at, and I haven't decided what I want to do yet. Usually I try to plan these things out a couple weeks in advance, because I do actually spend a lot of time reading and researching before I do an episode. But as of right now, I'm still kind of stuck on about 3 different ones that I don't know what I want to go into. So I'll figure that out. I've got a couple weeks to figure that out. I'm sure I'll come up with something good. In the meantime, be sure to tune in to all the daily content if you're not already. I literally have a free link on my Twitter and on my Facebook that you get a full of the bonus content for free, and you can see if it's something that you want to pay for. So hit me up. I'll shoot you the link, and you can test it out and see if you enjoy what I'm doing. Check out the Substack. That's all I got. Tommy, thanks again for joining me. This has been great, and I will see everybody later.
All right, brother.